Hello and welcome to episode 3 of APTIM's APTCast, where a panel of APTIM experts discuss topics that matter to our clients in the government, commercial, and industrial spaces, as well as energy markets. My name is Beau Suthard. Here at APTIM, I am the director of our Coastal Ports and Marine program. Today we'll be discussing coastal restoration and resiliency and its effects on communities and how APTIM is helping to safeguard people in the environments we serve. With me today, I have two of our coastal experts who I'm going to have introduce themselves.
Good morning. I'm Nicole Sharp. I'm our coastal market lead at APTIM, and I'm also one of our senior engineers.
How you doing? I'm Cris Weber. I'm a senior coastal engineer in our Austin office and the Texas commercial director for APTIM.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us today and being here with us. I want to start with an overview of some of the complex issues we face in our markets and what our coastal communities and our clients face in the coastal market. Can you help explain some of these challenges and some of the things we're up against in the coastal world?
Absolutely. I think, in my opinion, the competing for funding is always a challenge at the state, federal, and local levels. Trying to find a way to balance in Texas and most of the coastal counties, the large industrial areas where there's inherent money available versus the lower socioeconomic that still has the same coastal challenges. Makes for a very complex funding mechanism.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the communities that we're trying to aid with their, resiliency and adaptation efforts, we have climate change and sea level rise, and it's a little bit unknown of what we're going to see in the future, and trying to make them, be ready for that condition is, very difficult. And, getting the funding for capital projects in place, as Cris mentioned, you're not only trying to get funding from your local source, but also you want cost sharing partners with that.
Right. So we also have resource constraints too, right? Not just financial. But Texas is a great example where they need raw materials for their coastal restoration projects, sand resources and marsh creation materials. And we're able to help out in that regard by doing large-scale seafloor mapping for these communities to help identify these resources. So there's financial resource constraints, there's material resource constraints, and sounds like a general difference between communities on how they view these adaptation strategies and the needs and how quickly they may need to implement them.
That's right. The variability of infrastructure is always a challenge.
Yeah, like even in Southeast Florida and Southwest Florida, we've assisted communities with dwindling sand sources. Most people don't think in South Florida, we're running out of sand, but we are. And, we've assisted communities with finding upland sand sources instead of using offshore material that's been historically used in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Right. Well, that's great. So what kind of expertise and skills are needed to tackle these challenges? I know that the coastal world is a diverse, multidisciplinary world. So what are some of the things we need to do to address these challenges?
I think you need to have a really multidisciplinary, expert team in place to really help guide your clients through the process. It's not just coastal engineering. We look into our surveyors, our geologists, the geophysical aspects. So you really need to have a collaborative team in place with creative thinking to create the best solution for our clients.
Regulatory specialists are critical, absolutely.
Yeah, so also I think of, that multidisciplinary world is even kind of growing. We're adding different types of engineering specialties to help do these adaptation or do these vulnerability assessments for various types of infrastructure on the coast, as opposed to earlier focus on the soft structures and the soft beach infrastructure or shoreline infrastructure. So that's one trend I'm seeing is our multidisciplinary team continues to grow.
Mm-hmm. It's important to keep in mind too that your clients are also part of the team, the interdisciplinary team, and educating them on what they need to know and helping them understand better what their needs are and how to address them. In a lot of cases, they're not terribly sophisticated. They know they have issues and they have problems that need to be addressed, and including them in the discussion and how we will like to help them in those projects is part of that learning curve that helps them get better at doing their work also.
Right, and especially for our coastal community clients, our coastal government clients, they then have to extrapolate that to their client base, which is their constituency and the residents along the coast. So there's a need to help educate not only our clients tackle these challenges, but the overall community as well, so they understand the importance and the need. What makes APTIM stand out as the right partner in these types of projects and programs?
I think the advantage with APTIM is that we have everyone in-house. We have the permitting staff, we have the engineering, we have the geology, we have the survey, we have the resiliency staff, all under the APTIM brand. So you can come to us for any one of your needs, and we're able to service you for what that specific project requires.
Right, and scale of projects too. We can do from the small projects all the way up to super large scale projects as well.
Yeah, we've just recently permitted a 300 cubic yard, small marina project locally, but then we've done million cubic yard dredging projects for larger clients. So, we can scale up and scale down as needed.
What about project examples or project needs that encompass both these soft green solutions to the gray solutions? Do we have some examples of projects like that might be larger scale? Like the IHNC project's one that jumps to mind.
The Bayou Floodgate.
Yeah.
I worked on that one briefly in the Louisiana office, and that is the largest of its kind in the world, is my understanding. Relatively new to the APTIM family, but it was interesting to work on that as it was getting put in place, and installed, and with the ribbon cutting opening, it was a great example of a very large-scale project serving a real need for the community.
Right. And some other examples in Louisiana, including the Inner Harbor Navigation Canal Surge Barrier, a large surge barrier that protects the Mr. Go and Inner Harbor of the New Orleans greater metropolitan area, and other projects we're doing marsh creation in front of those barriers. So combining those green marsh creation, acreage type project protection projects, which are backed up at these large scale civil works projects. So combining those together it provides a holistic approach to upland community protection. Nicole, how does APTIM design and adapt our projects to meet our clients' specific needs? Can you give us some examples of that?
Yeah, so I think the biggest, step is, meeting with your client first off, have that kickoff meeting, see what they really need, what they want, what their funding is, and you work with them within those constraints. So I think for, some of our clients, they have a large-scale beach renourishment program, so we're planning projects to last 8 to 10 years for them. Other clients, they look more on the localized scale, so they're trying to manage, 2 to 3 year programs. So I think we really sit down and understand our clients' needs and desires, and we tailor our projects to those needs, and also what's best for the environment and the conditions that, their community faces.
Right. So what's some examples of how we creatively or build some flexibility into our programs?
Okay. So one example would be on the west coast of Florida on Captiva. We recently went out to bid for their 2021 renourishment project. So for them, it's an island, so they have a large tourist season during the winter months. So they didn't want to disrupt the tourists with, dredge pipes all over the beach. So we went out during an optimal and suboptimal season. And the optimal season is the non-tourist season, but it actually coincides with sea turtle nesting season. But we went through the process and permitted it through the proper agencies that there were protections in place that we could construct during sea turtle nesting season without disturbing the sea turtles, but also we wouldn't disturb the tourists also. And then we had the suboptimal season, which was the high months, which include, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's holiday. So we went out to bid, and most dredgers can't work in Florida because of sea turtle nesting season. So by going out with these 2 different seasons and telling the dredger, hey, you can actually work during this, usual environmental window, we saved our client about $2.5 million on project bids.
That's fantastic. Another example that pops to my mind is what we're doing in the northern Gulf of Mexico for large-scale sediment mapping. We're working with a number of clients to identify these large sand resources that are going to be needed for coastal restoration projects. And I've been able to work with multiple different jurisdictions to get a bigger bang for their buck in terms of mobilization, whereas working with state agencies in state water work, but coupling that from that same mobilization with federal work, with federal agencies, funding through some of these state agencies. So we're able to leverage our expertise and experience and our knowledge of how to do these jobs to allow for cost efficiencies for multiple jurisdictions who all have a shared goal here. So,
in Texas, we work with a local client in a repetitive survey, beach survey, There were places that were intentionally left out initially in the first couple that we went back working with the client to identify that there was these other locations that were really needed more information, more data for a holistic approach for how you'd manage the sand and the sediments along the beaches. So over the course of working with that client, we were identifying additional places that we would apply our resources to help them better understand their local dynamics along the beach.
Great, that's very important. Here's an interesting responses to this. How does the work we do affect local communities and subsets of local communities, different industries or different community groups?
Well, I think one of the, big communities that we do hit is the tourist industry. That, Florida is a thriving tourism industry going to our beaches. And the Office of Economic and Demographic Research produced a study, I believe it was a few years ago, that found out that beaches have a return on investment over 5. That's huge.
Yeah.
And it's actually larger than, Central Florida's tourism draw. So,
Wow.
Just having, what we do bring that type of money into communities. And some of these tourism, communities are at the billions of dollar range. So it really supports that local economy, the people working on the beaches, the hoteliers, the tour, everyone that interacts with the tourists. So I think, it really helps with those. And then I know with Texas, I think you have more of the environmental aspect with the fishing community and,
We have, outside of the large metropolitan areas, we have a lot of smaller communities that are considered fishing villages. Mm-hmm. They're towns, they're cities, but it's important that way of life where, the fishing is part of the inherent lifestyle there. It's part of the family, it's part of the business, it's part of the culture, and helping them maintain that part of their lifestyle is incredibly important.
Yeah, and I think another good example of that too is also in the northern Gulf of Mexico, where we have a large oil and gas industry, right? And the Bayou Chene floodgate is a good example of that. It is not only protecting the local residents and the communities there, but protecting the upstream resources, the boats, the crews, the pumping stations, and things of that nature from large-scale intrusion of storm surge and other things. So it really does kind of affect all these different coastal community groups and subgroups across the board. Cris, specifically, Texas and other states, how does our work have an effect at the state level?
It's intrinsic. APTIM does a great job of integrating with the state, local, and even the federal programs. One of the examples is large-scale offshore mapping, identifying offshore sediment resources, identifying the geophysics that are available. They work together hand in glove. The state is the non-federal sponsor for the vast majority of the coastal program in Texas, and it's a piece of the puzzle. And we help them identify and understand their needs and then help them execute their projects in their systems in Texas. And it kind of goes back to the interdisciplinary aspect where the state reaches out to anyone that can help, and there are several different agencies that we interact with to help them identify connecting the dots, how you connect funding to projects, how you connect personnel and people and skill sets and expertise to those projects. Right. So it's a pretty integrated system in order to get these projects up and running. Yeah,
and that leads me to another state example, in the state of Louisiana. We've talked a lot about design and some of the initial studies that we do to support these, but one thing we haven't talked about is the monitoring of these projects. Another statewide program for monitoring that we do is the Coastwide Reference, CRIMS, Coastwide Reference and Monitoring System for the state of Louisiana, where we deploy and maintain through a joint venture a large, over nearly 400 station coastal monitoring program that monitors sea level, sedimentation, vegetation, all the different components of the natural environment to see how our coastal restoration projects are improving or changing or protecting the environment. And that leads me to another thought, because CRIMS is a really good example of our technology. What types of technologies and things do we employ at APTIM that is really advancing the engineering and science of the coastal world?
I know in Texas we're using traditional surveying geomatics, high-resolution survey data, and also implementing the larger unmanned aerial vehicle surveys, moving a little further offshore. Mm-hmm. it's helping with the photogrammetry, looking at the vegetation, looking at the shorelines, and then also used in construction observation, where you can do real-time construction of projects and understand a little bit of how that's going along the way.
Yeah.
And I think in Florida, for most of our clients, their projects require some type of numerical modeling. So we use advanced models such as Delft 3D, Mike 21, just models to help guide us in the process as a tool in our belt. Also, on the surveying front, for several Florida clients, we've done 3D mapping. So it creates a really nice image and a DEM that they can utilize, for their coastal management program.
Right. No, that's great stuff. Two other things that popped to my mind. The use of UAVs for our construction administration and observation component. That's something we've recently added and built upon our cloud-based construction observation programs that we've added. That allows us to do these observations in real time, uploaded to the cloud, where our clients and contractors and team members can see construction observations and project issues or challenges or successes in real time. And jumping back to the CRIMS project, another thing we have implemented this cycle is data telemetry. So real-time data telemetry from some of our remote sites out in the bayous of Louisiana to get that data back to our data repository and dashboards.
That's always a challenge.
Yeah.
When you're collecting high volume data, which as an engineer, I love data. I love lots of data. And I'll figure out how to use it. We'll figure out later how to get it all implemented. Yeah. But going out and pulling it off the systems, figuring out how to get large data sets from the deep field where there's not a lot of infrastructure around is always a challenge. So that's a pretty amazing approach to get the real-time telemetry-based data sharing.
Yeah, which is great. All right, continuing on the technology theme, how do we keep up with, invest in, and train our teams for these developing cutting-edge technologies that we use?
Well, I think one of the most important things is training our own staff. So we make sure not only are we doing our own internal training, but sometimes we send staff out for external training from companies that maybe develop our models or develop the software that we're utilizing. Most recently, we've got some really cool technology for construction observations utilizing a drone in a box, where it really takes the user aspect out of it, and you can really program your construction observations and just have the drone out there without needing actually personnel on site.
Drone on call.
Yes, exactly, your concierge drone.
Nice, yeah. Another example that I can think of is a project we've done in Manatee County, where we adapted and used for the first time a drone-based magnetometer to do some magnetic anomaly mapping in the nearshore. It greatly increased our ability to cover a large area in a quick time in a high-quality manner, as opposed to manually diving with handheld magnetometers. And this was an investment both from our client, but also from us, putting in the time and energy, putting extra staff out on our time in order to train the staff in this new technology. We're able to replicate it and test it multiple times so that we can get the bugs out and learn what we can about that system. So now it's ready to deploy for other clients moving forward.
So we also participate in the national professional societies, where we're engaging at a very high level, national and the state level student chapters when we get reach down that far, but the state chapters for professional engineers, professional scientists, in engaging in an industry-wide discussion of what is the state of the art, what is the state of the industry, looking at how other people are thinking through projects, so it helps us inform how we can look at some of the best technology that's available, some of the best think that's out there in order to get to the better results, not only for the environment and our clients, but also to do good projects.
Right, that's great. Switching gears a little bit, how does APTIM monitor climate change and specifically rising sea levels? How far in the future do we look when we're representing our clients and designing projects?
Well, one aspect of sea level rise is what is the duration, what is the lifespan of the project that you're designing for. So inherently, we're building sea level rise and climate change into all of our projects. For beach renourishment projects, we typically use Corps of Engineer guidance and try to predict the sea level rise over the span of the design life of the project. So a lot of our projects, we have a permit for 10, 15 years. So we're easily able to identify what type of sea level rise are we going to anticipate in that time frame, and we can easily adapt if we need to add an extra half foot into our project design by, getting a permit modification or, coordinating with the agencies to see, how we can, make sure that the beach is more resilient. But for longer term projects, such as coastal structures, that's when you really have to start looking at the various scenarios. So, for example, for funding in Florida, they want you to look at the planning horizons for 2040 and 2070. What will the sea level rise be in those time frames? So I think when you're building more of a hard structure, that's when we really dig into what scenario is best. So I know Cris was mentioning different scenarios and how do we utilize them. So if you want to go into those.
I think most of the practitioners are very familiar with IPCC relative sea level rise curves and where we fall in those curves. Is it the low, is it the intermediate low, the intermediate high, or the high? And the range is extraordinary. Worst case scenario, we're several meters in 100 years in the time frame. And a lot of what we're doing for monitoring sea level rise is determining where we fall on those curves. And it's variable along the shorelines. It's not consistent everywhere. So Texas has some variability. North Gulf of Mexico and Florida all have different locations on those curves, but we tend to be trending towards the intermediate high, intermediate low relative sea level rise curves, which it's alarming, and it's a very critical component for how you think through your project design is how much buffer can you put in, and when is it going to be eliminated? When are you actually exceeding those curves? And it goes back to the CRIMS. It's data collection. It's as much data as you can get. It's as much as we can figure out now is going to help us predict what we need to do over the 20, 30, 40-year life cycles.
Right. Great. Are we seeing an increase here at APTIM for the need from clients and organizations for coastal restoration, coastal protection, coastal resiliency support?
I would say yes. I think with seeing the impacts from climate change and sea level rise, it's not only doing the projects we've historically done, such as beach renourishment, seawalls, some type of coastal stabilization, but we're now getting pulled into assisting community with vulnerability assessments.
Nicole and Cris, I want to thank you both very much for being with us here today. And for those of you listening, APTIM is an industry leader headquartered out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We have more than 4,000 team members worldwide. We specialize in environmental services, resiliency, sustainability, and environmental solutions, as well as technical and data solutions, program management, and critical infrastructure. Please come back next month for more APTIM expertise. In the meantime, please subscribe to APTCast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bo.
Thanks, Bo.
Nikki.
Thanks.